My name is Alara Vance. For the past 6 years, my world has been defined by the scent of cedar and salt, by the patient scrape of a handplane over weathered teak, and by the quiet rhythm of the tides in Port Blossom, Oregon. Here, in my small workshop overlooking the harbor, I don't save lives. I save boats. I take the forgotten, the splintered, the sun-bleached skeletons of old vessels and breathe life back into their timbers. It's slow, deliberate work. It requires listening to the groan of the wood, to the whisper of the wind, and it has taught me a kind of peace I never knew existed. This peace is a fragile thing, a thin layer of varnish over a much rougher grain. Before the boats, there was fire. For 12 years, I was a wildland firefighter, part of an elite hotshot crew that chased infernos across the Sierra Nevadas. My life was measured in acres burned, in chain lengths of fire line dug, in the deafening roar of a crown fire exploding through a stand of ponderosa pines. I was good at it. I was strong, I was steady, and I understood the terrifying logic of the flames. My family never understood. To them, my career was a curiosity, a slightly embarrassing, blue-collar phase I was supposed to grow out of. My younger brother, Julian, was their masterpiece. He was the one who went to Stanford, the one who landed a coveted position at a high-flying venture capital firm in San Francisco before his 25th birthday. He wore tailored suits, spoke in acronyms I didn't understand, and radiated a polished, effortless success that made my parents glow. At family gatherings, Julian was the sun. I was a distant, dusty moon, occasionally mentioned with a sigh and a vague, "Alara's still out, in the woods." When I left the service, I didn't explain why. I didn't tell them about the Blackwood Canyon fire, the one that nearly claimed me along with a half-dozen others. I didn't talk about the months of recovery, the physical therapy to coax my left hand to close into a fist again, or the nightmares that left my sheets soaked in sweat, my throat raw from silent screams. I just packed a duffel bag, moved to this quiet coastal town, and started over. I let them believe what they wanted to believe, that I had failed, or quit, or simply drifted away as I always had. Silence felt safer than explanation. It felt like a wall I could hide behind. But walls, I've learned, don't just keep others out. They also keep you in. What my family never knew, what no one in Port Blossom knew, was that I didn't leave the fire empty-handed. I carried its memory in the network of faint, silvery scars on my arm and back. And I carried a secret tucked away in a fireproof lockbox at the bottom of my closet, a medal for valor from the governor and a check from the Wildfire Heroes Fund for $250,000. I'd never cashed it. The money felt like blood money, a payment for a piece of my soul I wasn't sure I'd ever get back. It was my ghost, my burden, and my only tangible proof that what I did mattered. Until one day, the world I had so carefully built began to splinter. It began, as it so often did, with a phone call from my mother. Her voice was bright, chirpy, a carefully constructed sound that always preceded a request. "Alara, darling. How are your little boats?" she asked. "They're fine, Mom. I'm just finishing up the bright work on a 30-foot catch." "She's a beauty." "Oh, that's lovely," she said, the word floating in the air, unattached to any genuine interest. "Listen, the reason I'm calling is that Julian's firm is hosting its annual Founders Gala next month. It's a very prestigious event to honor community leaders and innovators. He's being recognized for his work on that new tech incubator. We're all so proud, and we want you to be there." I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. "Mom, I don't know. It's a long drive, and I'm really busy here." "Don't be silly. It's one night," she insisted. It would mean the world to Julian. And to us. "Just, please, darling, try to find something a little more formal to wear this time. Not those work pants." I looked down at my jeans, stained with varnish and speckled with sawdust. I thought of the noise, the crowds, the polite, dismissive smiles. But a small, foolish part of me, a part one thought had long since starved to death, whispered that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, they would see me. "Okay, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll be there." The restaurant where we met for a pre-gala family dinner was the kind of place that used foam as a garnish. It was all glass and steel and hushed, important-sounding conversations. Julian sat at the head of the table, a king in his court. He looked tan and rested, his dark hair perfectly styled. He held his wine glass with a casual grace, laughing at something my father said. My father, who beamed at him, his face a mask of pure, uncomplicated pride. I sat at the other end, next to a cousin who worked in marketing. She leaned in, her perfume cloying. "So, Alara, are you still doing that boat thing? It must be so relaxing. Like a hobby that pays for itself." I gave her the small, tired smile I reserved for these occasions. "It's a business. And it's a lot of work, but I love it." "Oh, I'm sure," she said, her eyes already scanning the room for someone more interesting to talk to. Throughout the dinner, the conversation swirled around Julian's latest triumphs, the 7-figure deal he'd closed, the article that had mentioned his name in Forbes, the new condo he was buying with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. I felt myself shrinking, becoming invisible. It was a familiar sensation, like slipping into a cold, deep body of water. I ate my sea bass in silence, watching the performance of my family, a play I had a role in but had never been given the script for. Later, as dessert was served, my mother leaned toward me, her voice a low, urgent hum. "Alara, I hope you're not planning on talking too much about your old job tonight. At the gala. It can make people uncomfortable. All that talk of fires and danger. Tonight is about celebrating success." I looked at the artfully arranged chocolate lava cake in front of me. Its warm, dark center threatened to spill out. I felt a kinship with it. I just nodded, pushing the cake away, my appetite gone. The message was clear, as it always was. Your life, your past, your truth, is not welcome here. Be smaller. Be quieter. Be less. Back in my hotel room, the silence was a relief. I kicked off the painfully elegant heels my mother had insisted I buy and sank onto the edge of the bed. The city lights glittered outside the window, a galaxy of ambition and noise. I thought of my workshop, of the smell of the sea, of the solid, grounding presence of wood and tools. That was my world. This was theirs. I opened my suitcase and pulled out the small, fireproof box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was the metal. It was heavy, unadorned silver, with a simple engraving of a phoenix rising from flames. Beside it lay the check, folded and slightly yellowed. "For extraordinary courage and service." The words felt like they belonged to someone else. My mind drifted back to that day. The Blackwood Canyon fire. The smoke was so thick it was like breathing wool. The heat was a physical presence, pressing in from all sides, sucking the air from my lungs. We were trying to hold a line near a small, isolated community of cabins when the wind shifted. It happened in an instant. The fire didn't just move, it exploded. It jumped the canyon, a monstrous, roaring beast, and we were trapped. I remember the chaos, the shouting on the radio, the desperate scramble to deploy our emergency shelters. But a call had come through, a civilian, a man who had ignored evacuation orders, was trapped in the last cabin at the end of the road. Protocol was clear, we were to hold our position. No one goes in. It was a suicide mission. But I could hear the desperation in the dispatcher's voice. And I could see the cabin, its roof already starting to glow from the inside. I didn't think. I just ran. The heat inside the cabin was unimaginable. It felt like stepping into a blast furnace. I found him on the floor, unconscious, a nasty gash on his forehead. He was a big man, and dragging him was like trying to move a boulder. The smoke was a blinding, choking fog. My lungs burned. A flaming beam fell from the ceiling, grazing my arm, the pain a white-hot shock that made my vision swim. But I didn't let go. I kept pulling, whispering through my mask, "Stay with me. Just stay with me. I've got you." When we finally burst through the collapsing doorway and into the singed air outside, the cabin erupted behind us in a geyser of sparks and flame. I got him clear, laid him on the ground, and then my own body gave out. I remember the world tilting, the ground rushing up to meet me, and then nothing. I woke up in a hospital burn unit. No one from my family came. Julian sent a text a week later, "Heard you had an accident. Mom's worried. Let us know when you're out of the woods." I never replied. The physical recovery was grueling, but the mental recovery was harder. The fire had burned something out of me, my nerve, my certainty, my belief that I was invincible. I couldn't go back. So I disappeared. I closed the box and pushed it back into my suitcase. The girl who had run into that fire was a stranger to me now. A ghost. And tonight, I was expected to pretend she had never existed at all. The gala was held in a restored ballroom with soaring ceilings and chandeliers that dripped crystals like frozen tears. The air hummed with the sound of a string quartet, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the murmur of 100 conversations about stock options and market shares. I stood near the edge of the room, a small island in a sea of tuxedos and silk gowns, feeling profoundly out of place. Julian was in his element, moving through the crowd with an easy confidence, shaking hands, clapping men on the back. My parents trailed in his wake, smiling proudly. I saw my father point me out to one of Julian's colleagues, and I could almost hear the introduction. "And that's our daughter, Alara. She works with her hands." I was nursing a glass of sparkling water, trying to merge with a potted ficus, when a man approached me. He was tall, with silvering hair at his temples and kind, intelligent eyes. He wore a suit with an understated elegance, as if he were completely comfortable in his own skin. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm and steady. "You look familiar. Have we met?" I offered a polite, non-committal smile. "I don't think so. I'm not from around here." He tilted his head, his gaze analytical, searching. "My name is Marcus Thorne." The name registered vaguely. Julian had mentioned him. Thorne was a titan of the tech industry, a legendary CEO whose company Julian's firm was courting for a massive investment. He was the guest of honor. "Alara Vance," I replied, extending my hand. He took it, but his eyes were fixed on my face, a flicker of something, confusion, then dawning recognition, in their depths. "Vance," he repeated slowly. He looked down at my left arm, where the sleeve of my dress didn't quite cover the faint, latticed pattern of the scars. His breath hitched. "Blackwood Canyon," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The fire. The last cabin." My heart hammered against my ribs. The air in my lungs turned to ice. No one had ever recognized me. The news reports had been vague, a nameless, faceless firefighter. He took a step closer, his eyes wide with a look of sheer, unadulterated awe. "It was you. You pulled me out. I was in and out of consciousness, but I remember your voice. Through the mask. You kept saying, 'I've got you.'" I couldn't speak. I could only nod, a tiny, jerky movement. The opulent ballroom, the music, the chatter, it all faded into a distant hum. There was only this man's face, etched with a memory I had tried so hard to bury. "I've been trying to find you for years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The department wouldn't release your name. Cited privacy. All they said was that you'd left the service. I wanted to thank you. My God, I wanted to thank you." Before I could process what was happening, it was time for the evening speeches. Julian went up first, accepting his award with a polished, charming speech about innovation and disruption. My parents watched him, their faces shining with adoration. Then, Marcus Thorne was introduced. He walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and scanned the room. He began with the expected pleasantries, thanking Julian's firm, speaking about the future of technology. But then he paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd until it found me. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate leaders and innovators," he began, his voice resonating through the silent room. "We celebrate those who build things. But I want to take a moment to talk about a different kind of leader. The kind who doesn't build, but saves. The kind who runs toward the danger that everyone else is running from." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. Julian shifted uncomfortably at his table. My mother shot me a warning glance. "6 years ago, I made a stupid mistake," Marcus continued, his voice steady and clear. "I ignored an evacuation order during the Blackwood Canyon fire. I thought I was smarter than the fire. I was wrong. I was trapped in a burning cabin, and I was sure I was going to die." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But I didn't die, because a firefighter ignored protocol and ran in to get me. She dragged me through the smoke and the flames, and just as she got me to safety, the structure collapsed behind us. She was badly burned. She collapsed from her injuries and smoke inhalation right after she saved my life." Every eye in the room was now on him, hanging on every word. I felt myself wanting to shrink, to disappear, but my feet were rooted to the floor. "I never knew her name," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "Until tonight. She's standing right over there." He raised his hand and pointed directly at me. "Her name is Alara Vance." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a heavy, Deafening silence, broken only by a few soft gasps. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes turning to me, not with dismissal, but with a new, startling intensity. I saw Julian's face, pale and slack-jawed with shock. I saw my father's confused frown, my mother's hand flying to her mouth. After the incident, Marcus went on, his voice unwavering. The state of California recognized her with its highest award for valor and a grant from the Wildfire Heroes Fund of $250,000. An award she never publicly accepted and a fund she, to my knowledge, has never touched. She asked for no recognition. She simply disappeared and quietly went on with her life. He looked directly at me then, and the whole glittering, artificial world of the gala seemed to fall away. In his eyes, I saw not a CEO, not a titan of industry, but a man who remembered the smell of smoke and the feel of terror. And in that moment, he didn't just see me. He bore witness. We rightly honor the people who build our future, he concluded, his voice resonating with a deep, quiet power. But let us never forget to honor the ones who, in the face of annihilation, save our present. Alara, thank you. The room erupted in applause. It wasn't the polite, measured clapping from earlier. It was a wave of thunderous, genuine sound that washed over me, stunning me. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood there, breathing, as 6 years of buried history came rushing into the light. The wall of silence I had built around myself had just been brought down, not by an earthquake, but by a single, spoken truth. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of surreal encounters. Strangers came up to shake my hand, their eyes filled with a respect I found deeply unsettling. Julian's colleagues, who had barely glanced at me an hour before, now wanted to hear the whole story. My family cornered me near the coat check, their faces a chaotic mess of emotions. Alara, my father stammered, his usual booming confidence gone. We had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked, I said, the words simple, unadorned, and heavier than any accusation. My mother was fluttering, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. $250,000? You've just had that, sitting there all this time? Darling, we could have helped you invest it. You could have bought a proper house. The we hung in the air, a Freudian slip of staggering proportions. Julian was the most unnerving. He draped an arm around my shoulders, a gesture that felt both proprietary and panicked. Lara, this is incredible. I mean, truly. Marcus Thorne. You saved Marcus Thorne. Do you have any idea what this means? I knew exactly what he thought it meant. It meant leverage, connection, opportunity. It had nothing to do with me. The drive back to Port Blossom the next day was long and quiet. My phone buzzed intermittently with texts from my mother, each one more insistent than the last. We need to talk. Call me. We're having a family dinner Sunday. A proper celebration for you this time. Against my better judgment, I went. The dinner was a carefully staged production of familial pride. My favorite scallops were on the menu. My father opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. They toasted me, their new, improved, and suddenly valuable daughter. It didn't take long for the real agenda to surface. Over coffee, my mother cleared her throat, placing her hand over mine. Darling, we were talking. Julian has this visionary new project he's developing. A fund to support eco-conscious startups. It's brilliant, but it needs seed capital to get off the ground. A show of faith from an early investor. Julian jumped in, his voice smooth as silk. It's a legacy project, Lara. Something we could build together. With a small investment from you, say $100,000, we could change the world. And the returns would be significant. It's the smart thing to do with that money. I looked from my mother's hopeful, pleading face to my brother's eager, predatory smile. The scallops turned to lead in my stomach. The beautiful, peaceful life I had carved out for myself felt a million miles away. They hadn't seen me at all. They had only seen a bank account. No, I said. The word fell into the silence like a stone. What? Julian's smile froze. The money isn't an investment fund, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I was surprised at how steady it was. It's mine, and I'm not interested. The warmth in the room evaporated. My father looked disappointed. My mother looked hurt. Julian looked, for the first time, openly angry. The play was over, and the actors had forgotten their lines. I excused myself soon after, the taste of betrayal bitter in my mouth. A week later, Julian showed up at my workshop. He arrived unannounced, driving a sleek, ridiculously expensive sports car that looked alien parked next to my dusty pickup truck. He wasn't smiling. He looked haggard, the polished veneer stripped away to reveal something raw and desperate underneath. "I need to talk to you," he said, walking past me into the workshop, his expensive leather shoes scattering sawdust. "If this is about the eco fund, Julian, the answer is still no." He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "There is no eco fund. Alara, I'm in trouble. Real trouble." He sank onto a wooden crate, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. "I have debts. Gambling. I got in over my head with some private poker games. I thought I could win it back. I kept borrowing." He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "I owe $80,000. To people you don't want to owe money to. They gave me 2 weeks. If I don't pay them, my career is the least of my worries. They'll ruin me. They know where Mom and Dad live." The threat, whether real or manufactured, landed like a punch to the gut. This was the real play. This was the desperation. "So you want me to bail you out?" I said flatly. "It's a loan. I swear I'll pay you back, every cent. I'm about to close a big deal at work." His voice trailed off. He knew how it sounded. I walked over to the half-finished hull of the ketch I'd been working on. I ran my hand over the smooth, curved wood. I had spent a month on this section alone, patiently sanding, sealing, bringing out the beauty of the grain. It was honest work. It was real. "Let me ask you a question, Julian," I said, not looking at him. "If that night at the gala had never happened, if Marcus Thorne hadn't been there, if I was still just your weird sister who fixes boats, would you be here right now, asking me for help?" The silence that followed was my answer. I thought of the fire, of the crushing weight of responsibility, of the lonely road to recovery. I thought of the peace I had painstakingly built for myself, one plank at a time. And I thought of the brother who had never once asked if I was okay. But I also saw the terror in his face. And despite everything, he was still my brother. "I can't give you $80,000, I said finally. "I won't. That would be saving you from the consequences of your choices, and I won't do that." His face fell. But I continued, taking a deep breath. "I will give you $20,000. Not as a loan, but as a gift. On 2 conditions. 1, you check yourself into a certified gambler's addiction program. I want to see the enrollment forms. 2, you tell Mom and Dad the truth. The whole truth. Not the edited for sympathy version." He stared at me, a mixture of relief and resentment warring in his eyes. He wanted a bailout, not a lifeline with strings attached. But he was desperate. "Fine," he mumbled. "Okay, thank you." He left as quickly as he'd come. I transferred the money that afternoon, a sick feeling churning in my stomach. I felt less like a savior and more like an accomplice. I told myself it was a compromise, a boundary. But a part of me knew it was just another desperate attempt to buy a piece that was never for sale. 10 days later, I was scrolling through social media when a photo stopped my thumb. It was Julian. He was on a yacht, grinning, a champagne flute in one hand, his arm around a beautiful woman I didn't recognize. The background was a sun-drenched, tropical-looking coastline. The caption read, "Seizing the day. Sometimes you just have to bet on yourself. #blessed, #good vibes." Another photo showed him at a casino table in what looked like Monaco, a triumphant look on his face, a mountain of chips in front of him. There was no rehab. There was no confession. There was only my $20,000 fueling the very fire I had tried to help him put out. The betrayal was so profound, so blatant, it left me breathless. He hadn't just lied, he had mocked my trust, flaunted it for the world to see. I picked up my phone and called him. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. So I sent him a single text message. I hope it was worth it. Then I blocked his number. I blocked my mother's. I blocked my father's. The wall of silence I had taken down was going back up, brick by painful brick. This time, it wasn't to hide. It was to protect what was left of myself. The backlash began as a trickle, then became a flood. It started with a post on a popular online forum, an anonymous, rambling screed titled, "My hero, sister, left my family to drown." It was unmistakably Julian's voice, artfully twisting the narrative. He painted himself as a well-meaning entrepreneur betrayed by a bitter, jealous sibling. He wrote of my hoarded fortune, my refusal to help my family, my cold-hearted abandonment. He conveniently left out the gambling, the lies, the yacht. The story was gasoline on the internet's fire. It was picked up by blogs, then by a sleazy local tabloid that ran my picture from the gala next to a headline, "From Hero to Zero, Firefighter's Family Fortune Feud." The poison seeped into my life in Port Blossom. Clients started canceling their restoration projects, giving flimsy excuses. People at the grocery store would stare, then whisper to each other as I walked past. The warmth of the small-town community I'd come to cherish grew cold and suspicious. I felt the familiar sting of being misunderstood, of being judged by a story that wasn't mine. I started spending more and more time alone in my workshop, the silence my only companion. The lowest point came on a Tuesday night. I was working late, trying to lose myself in the rhythmic sanding of a deck, when I heard a noise from my office. I walked in to find the window shattered, glass crunching under my boots. My desk had been ransacked, and the fireproof lockbox, which I kept in a floor safe, was gone. My heart seized. It wasn't just the metal and the uncashed check. The box had contained all my financial records, my journals from my firefighting days, the last tangible pieces of my old life. The police came, took a report, but there was little they could do. No witnesses, no forced entry on the main door. They suggested it was probably just a random theft, someone who thought a boat workshop would have expensive tools. But I knew. This wasn't random. This was a violation. It was an escalation, a message. Julian, or someone he'd sent, had crossed a final, unforgivable line. I felt a terror I hadn't known since the fire. Back then, the threat had been elemental, impersonal. This was intimate. This was personal. This was my own family trying to burn me to the ground. For days, I barely ate. I couldn't sleep. I jumped at every sound. The peace I had built was in ashes. Just when I felt I had nothing left, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simple, checking in. It was from Marcus Thorne. We met at a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop miles from Port Blossom. He looked at my pale face and the dark circles under my eyes with an expression of deep concern. "I saw the articles, Alara," he said gently. I knew it wasn't the truth. I just shook my head, unable to speak, a knot of grief and anger lodged in my throat. "I owe you my life," he said, his voice firm. "I don't repay my debts lightly." After I read that first post, I had a private investigator I use for my company look into it. "I hope you don't mind." He slid a manila folder across the table. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages between Julian and a man, discussing the break-in. There was a detailed report tracing the IP address of the original, anonymous, post to Julian's work computer. There were bank records showing my $20,000 being wired to an offshore account, and from there, to a casino in Monaco. It was all there. The whole ugly, sordid truth. "He also got this," Marcus said, pulling a USB drive from his pocket. "A recording. The man Julian hired to break in got nervous. He recorded a call with your brother, trying to get more money." I stared at the folder, at the irrefutable proof of my brother's betrayal. I felt a strange, cold clarity settle over me. The grief was still there, but the fear was beginning to recede, replaced by a slow-burning, righteous anger. "We can take this to the police," Marcus said. "We can press charges. For theft, for defamation, for extortion. You don't have to fight this alone anymore." I looked up at him, at this man who was practically a stranger, who owed me nothing but a debt he felt he could never repay. He wasn't trying to save me. He was handing me the tools to save myself. "You ran into a burning building for me," he said softly. "It's time you started fighting the fires in your own life." I took a deep breath, the first full, clean breath I'd taken in weeks. And I nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice clear and strong. No more silence. The legal process was swift and brutal. Faced with the mountain of evidence, Julian crumbled. There was no trial. His lawyers, paid for by my drain-looking father, arranged a settlement. He pled guilty to lesser charges in exchange for avoiding jail time. The sentence included court-mandated rehabilitation, 5 years of probation, full financial restitution to me and the others he'd scammed, and the permanent revocation of his license to work in the financial industry. His career was over. I did not attend the final hearing. I didn't need to. My victory wasn't in seeing him punished. It was in reclaiming my own story. The day the settlement was finalized, I drove to the bank. I walked to the counter, endorsed the 6-year-old check from the Wildfire Heroes Fund, and deposited it into my account. It no longer felt like blood money. It felt like seed money. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at my workshop. The handwriting was my mother's. I opened it with trepidation. It was short. "Alara," it read. "We are so sorry. We were blind. We see you now." It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a magic eraser for years of pain. But it was a beginning. I folded the letter and placed it in a new box, a simple wooden one I had made myself. Winter has settled over Port Blossom. The air is crisp and clean. The tourists are gone, and the town has returned to its quiet, authentic self. My business is thriving again. The story of my ordeal, once it came out, had turned the tide of public opinion. The apologies were awkward and heartfelt. The community, in its own way, was trying to make amends. This morning, Marcus Thorne stopped by the workshop. He didn't come as a CEO, but as a friend. He brought coffee and helped me hoist a new rudder into place on the ketch. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the cry of the gulls and the gentle lapping of the water against the docks. "I'm starting a foundation," I told him, breaking the silence. "Using the award money. It's going to be a nonprofit that teaches at-risk youth maritime skills. Carpentry, navigation, mechanics. A trade. A purpose." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "A different kind of rescue mission," he said. "Something like that," I replied, smiling back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird, its wings outstretched as if in flight. He'd made it himself. The wood was a deep, rich teak, salvaged from an old shipwreck. "For the new beginning," he said, placing it in my hand. I closed my fingers around it. It felt solid, real, and full of promise. The fire is a part of my story, but it is no longer the whole story. The scars on my skin and the ghosts in my memory are still there, but they don't define me. I am defined by the choices I make now. I am the woman who saves boats. I am the woman who builds. I am the woman who, after walking through flames, finally learned to fight for the quiet, beautiful light of her own life. And, for the first time, I am at peace.